Welcome on this session, Power BI and Business Central Deep Dive Tips and Tricks. Thanks to the sponsors that we are allowed to present this session, and I also would like to remind you about the prizes and the raffle. But I will come back to this slide also after the session. Let me start by presenting ourselves. My name is Steven Renders from Belgium. I am not a native English-speaking person, but I'll do my best. I can also do the presentation in Dutch or French, a little bit of Spanish, but I think I'll stick to Flemish English. I'm working at the company Plataan in Belgium. I have my own blog, Think About It, and I'm mainly involved in training and consultancy surrounding Business Central. I've been working with the product for many years, and before that with other products. I've been around since '97, I think, in IT, so that's quite a long time. And I'll try to guide you through the forest of Power BI and Business Central, and I will do that together with a good friend of mine and colleague Renato.
Hello, everyone. I hope that you can hear me. My name is Renato Fajdiga. I'm coming from Croatia, and I work for a company called Superbet. I'm on the client side of this implementation part, but in my, let's say, past, 6 months ago, I worked as a consultant and on the implementation of Dynamics NAV, and I also work as a trainer for Dynamics 365 Business Central. All my Power Platforms background is started with BI, and now I am expanding it with Power Automate and Power Apps. Thank you, Steven.
Thank you, Renato. So we prepared a small agenda for today, but depending on how time goes, we might need to skip something. We'll see how that goes. We usually have the habit of foreseeing too much, but the idea is to do a deep dive and to dive into some very interesting topics. And we'll start by answering the question: how exactly do I need to fetch data from Business Central? How does that impact my queries, and what's actually recommended performance-wise? And Renato will demo that in a couple of moments. Then I will try to answer the question: once we have data coming from Business Central and arriving in Power BI, how to build a good data model in Power BI? Is it important to build a good data model? What's the impact of not building a good data model? And are there some rules that recommendations we need to follow? Then once we have a data model and you've created one or multiple reports, it's also time to think about how to refresh the data. We have some default options, but by default, the refresh is always a full refresh. So is it also possible to implement an incremental refresh? The answer to that question is no and yes. Not by default, but by implementing a workaround, which I will then also demonstrate. Then I have a more deep dive example. When you follow the guidelines around building a good data model and you remember the star and the snowflake, then in real life you can get into problems if you arrive in a situation where you have multiple fact tables. And a typical example there would be actuals and budgets. How can you link them? How can you put them into a data model? And I will use that as an example on how to overcome such issues. After that, I have some useful tips and tricks which come in handy when creating a Power BI reports, but maybe it might be interesting to move that to the end. We'll see how it goes. And then Renato will take over again with some really cool demonstrations and topics like how do I integrate Microsoft Teams and Power BI, and what can I do with Power Apps and Power BI. And of course, we also have some time for questions and answers. I hope that sounds like a good plan and a good agenda. And if so, I think we can get started with the first topic, which is for Renato. Would you like to take over the screen?
Yes, I will take over the screen, Steven. I will just share my screen presentation. Okay, and I will minimize I don't need you. So I will start with how do I need to fetch the data from Dynamics 365 Business Central and what are the prerequisites for do this. So to start developing the Power BI reports, first we need to see how we can fetch the data from Dynamics 365 Business Central. So there are multiple ways of fetching the data from Dynamics 365 Business Central into the Power BI. As you know, we have two different options of implementing Dynamics 365 Business Central. One is that you store your data, so your database is on-prem, somewhere on your server, or you have the SaaS implementation, which means that your data is in the cloud. And no matter which implementation you are using, you can take the advantages of Power BI for building the Power BI reports. After you create your Power BI reports, you can publish them to the Power BI service, so to the cloud. And there you can use common language queries where you can ask Power BI the questions about the data, about your data from Dynamics 365 Business Central. One common example can be for, let's say, show me the inventory of my item lamp on the East warehouse. So you will just type this and Power BI will return the information based on the data from the Business Central. After you are very good with these reports, you can embed reports, Power BI reports on the web, show it on the mobile on your to your users, or what you can do is that you can embed these reports. Steven will show you into Business Central back, which means that you are going to see the Power BI report natively inside the Business Central. What you can also do is embed Power BI report into Power Apps. So, and they bring the reporting to the Power Apps. So to not speak too much, let's go to the first demo. And for that, I will open Visual Studio. And here you can see that I have some queries. I will return back to this. I will now jump to my Power BI. So this is Power BI Desktop, free tool. I have Business Central installed on my laptop. So this means that I have also on-premise deployment of my Business Central. And if I click on Get Data More, I will have a possibility to connect to my SQL Server database, which means that my database from the Business Central is stored on the SQL. Okay, here I will enter my server and my instance. Yeah. I can choose between two different connectivity modes. One is import, second is direct query. Let's try with import. And in a second, I will have my demo database here inside my Power BI desktop. And here I can select, for example, item ledger entry, which is the data, which is a table where I can see my inventory or my transactions for the items. And when I select it, I click load. And in a few seconds, I will have my table imported into the Power BI. Here, I can see the data from my database. So this is my demo database, but you can connect also your production database of Dynamics 365 Business Central, which is implemented on-prem. Okay. Here you can see that, for example, we have normal standard fields from this table. What I can now do, I can easily build the reports. Let's say item number. And here I will find item number, for example. I will find, let's say, quantity, remaining quantity, and location. And now I have information how much item I have on each of these locations. So for example, I can see that my item 1896 minus S, I have 57 pieces on location green. And this is okay. I'm connected now to my on-prem database with SQL. What are other possibilities which I can use? If I go to the get data more, I can use Dynamics 365 Business Central connector, which I have two types. One is for on-premise and second one is for SaaS implementation. Or I can use OData. So I can use OData and then I will request the data from the Business Central through OData feed. For this, I prepared another Power BI report. So this one. To see how you can fetch the data, now I will return to my Visual Studio Code. The best solution to, and which I recommend to query the data is, of course, object in the Business Central, which is called query. So here I have query object. And I see that I have some properties, which is query type is normal. So it's not, for example, API, like this. I have the caption, and I have one property called data access intent read only. This means that when accessing to this query inventory, I will use the read only copy of the production database, which means that I will not affect so much my performance in the production. Also, then I specified my item, data item, or my table. As you can see here, I'm also using item ledger entry. I'm using columns are my attributes or fields from the table item ledger entry. And here now I have various fields. And when I scroll down, I see that I can create some filters. So for example, I filter my item ledger entry to constant value true, which means that it will show me only the open transactions. So open transactions, which means that only transactions which have remaining quantity. Also, I can join multiple items, tables to one query. For example, here I have joined item table to item ledger entry to get the different information from the item table. For example, on my item ledger entry table, where I have transactions, I don't have information about item description, or for example, base unit of measure. I can extend this with bringing the additional data item to my query. Okay, and this is how I build my query. What is also one good trick and practice is to use various methods when you are building the query. For example, method sum will sum you and return the amount or quantity to your query, and you will and it will sum it based on the primary key. Okay, and this is the example of the method sum. You can use count, average, and so on to, for example, count your open orders in the Business Central and so on. Now, when I built this query, I need to publish this query to my Business Central. For this, I'm using the Web Services XML file, where I specify the information about my query and how I will publish it. I said that it is object type query. I use query inventory as a name. I publish my object and set it true. Okay, when I compile this and go to my Business Central, when I go to Web Services, here I will find my two queries, query inventory and query location. What is also interesting that now I can see in data access intent list all the reports and all the queries pages which are Business Central using and what are their data access intent. As I say, we have the default, we have the read only, and we have possibility to allow write, which means that we will allow writing to this, let's say, report and so on. If we are, the default one is read write possibility. Okay. Now when I have my web service, so I created my query, I have web service in my Business Central, I can go and build my reports, for example, this one. To show you, I will just click on more. And here I can search for Business Central. And first, what I will see is my environments. Here I see that I have multiple environments, and one which where I publish my queries as a web service, I have in my Wave 2 sandbox. Inside my environment, it is like the database. I have my companies. Inside my companies, I have various web services, which are already published by Microsoft or by my colleagues. Here I will find my query inventory. And I can see here all the transactions for item ledger entry with all the fields from my query. This means that now I see also the fields from the item ledger entry table and also from the item table. When I click load, I will get the same screen like I have now here in my query inventory. If I take a look at my data, I can see my data from the Business Central. So this is how you can use the query object to query your data from the tables from the Dynamics 365 Business Central. You can also use query for the connection to the on-prem, as well as you're using it on the SaaS. Difference between SaaS and on-prem is that on-prem you can query the SQL database. On the SaaS version, you need to query only the web services. Okay, so when I have the report like this, I can then see what are the data inside my item ledger entry, and I see that, for example, this item I have remaining quantity on the different warehouses. I have the unit costs and cost amount actual. Okay, this is how you can get the data from the Dynamics 365 Business Central to your Power BI, and later now we will see how you can use it in Power BI Service and other Power Platform tools. Steven?
All right, thank you, Renato. I'm going to share my screen again. All right, so what we actually need to remember is that when you bring in data from Business Central on-prem or cloud, use the query object, so then you can create extensions which are compatible with both type of situations, and don't forget about the data access intent and your group bys. The next question is then, how do you convert all of these queries into a good data model? And the answer there is quite simple. You need to think about a star or a snowflake schema. And that means that in the center of your data model, you will have one table that contains the facts, the numerical data you would like to analyze, which could be sales data, purchase data, financial data, or other types of data. And you will surround these facts with dimensional attributes, as we call them in BI. But these dimensions could be Business Central dimensions or dimension set entries, but they can also be, for example, items, customers, salespeople, and so on. So here we see a practical example of such a data model with the fact sales in the middle, surrounded with all of these other tables. Let me go over to some examples. And the first example, let me open that, is here. A small data model that I created, which is a very simple representation of this star schema. Here in the center, we have the sales table, which contains the numbers you would like to analyze. And the sales table is then also linked to other tables, which might be customers, a date, a table, and many other tables. But with this data model, I have the possibility to analyze my sales by customers, but also all of the fields in here, like city, country, contact, and so on. And by date, that means by day, by year, month, quarter, and so on. I can then import some more tables, as I have done here, but the center of the data model is still the fact table sales, which is now surrounded with many other tables. And the most important thing here to do is to make sure you have one table, which is the fact table, surrounded with other tables. Now, between these other tables, for example, I have the sales table linked to customers. You can also link it to salesperson. So here I have sales linked to customers, customers linked to salespersons, which means I will create relationships here in the points of the star, which is fine. Then it becomes a snowflake model. Whatever you do, this is the good data model to use. Here I have another example with a couple of more tables. Okay, that is not really refreshing well. Let me switch over again. Strange. Okay. And let me minimize this. Then close that. It usually happens only. But here it is. It's Murphy's law that happens when you present. Okay. Can you still see my screen? Just to double check.
Yes, I can see it.
Okay. All right. So we still have the sales table here in the middle, but then surrounded with many more tables. It's still a star schema. Now, when you build a data model, the most important thing to remember is you follow star or snowflake. But make sure that when you create these relationships, that by accident you do not create circular relationships. So the last one that I have drawn here is not a good one, because if I would like to analyze, in this case, sales by product subcategory, then the system has two ways of getting there, using the table relations on top or using the table relations at the bottom. And it just actually called a circular table relationship, and which can end up in many issues. So don't do that. Try to create a star or a snowflake. Of course, you can do whatever you would like to do. If you're not following star or snowflake schemas, that will only mean that later on in your report, you will end up with some issues or very complex formulas to implement. So if you notice yourself creating very complex DAX formulas, there's probably something wrong with your data model. You might not be following star or snowflake. Another example is also star or snowflake can be understood by anyone, even by people who did not create it. So that's a good data model. Let me close this again to free up some memory. All right. Then the next thing I would like to talk about is how can we implement an incremental refresh? Because typically when you import data into Power BI desktop, it's always a full refresh that happens, unless you use direct query. But direct query is only possible if you go directly to the SQL database, and it's also not really recommended. So how can we implement an incremental refresh? Well, you might know that if you go to the Power BI documentation, that there is some documentation about an incremental refresh here, but it states, okay, you need a Power BI Pro. Okay, most people have that, and you can implement incremental refresh by defining a parameter in your data set, which is a range parameter based on a date field. Then you can use this parameter to filter your data, and then somewhere in the properties you can enable incremental refresh. However, in the small letters of the documentation, it also states that there are some connectors that do not support incremental refresh, which is, for example, OData, and of course the Business Central connector is based on OData. The API is also based on OData, so this is not a solution that we can use for a Business Central dataset. So we need to implement incremental refresh in a different way. How are we going to do that? Well, it's actually quite simple. Think about ledger entries that you are importing or sales lines. If there are a lot of lines, then you might want to implement an incremental refresh, especially if there are thousands or hundreds of thousands of these lines that might never change after a certain date. So what will I do? I'm going to import the data into Power BI Desktop. I'm going to duplicate the table, and then I'm going to apply a filter on it and doing a split. So basically, I'm splitting one table into two tables. The first part I will call static. I will not refresh it, and the second part I will refresh. That splitting of these tables I will do in Power Query. Then I will load both tables into the data model and union them again in the report by using DAX. And that's a way actually to implement an incremental refresh. How does that work? Well, I prepared a small example. And in this example, I am using sales lines for a demo. So I'm simply importing some sales lines from Business Central. I have some fields on here. I don't care about all of these fields. The field I am actually interested in is a shipment date. In this case, a date field that I'm going to use as the cut-off date to split and to determine what need to be static records and which need to be the records that need to be refreshed. All right, I have this table in here. I'm going to publish it as a web service. And then, of course, I'm going to import the data into Power BI Desktop. Let me wait a couple of seconds until Power BI Desktop opens. And then I can show you how to create that incremental refresh. In the end result of the report, I am showing three tables. There are loading at the moment. So let's give that a second. Here I have a table, here I have a table, and here I have a table. And basically, on the left side, I have all of my sales lines. On the top side, the static ones, and then below the incremental ones. And at this moment, I have 20 static rows and no incremental rows. So I'm using the same technique as Renato used to import data, but then in the data transformation and Power Query, I actually duplicated my query and renamed them. So then I have two queries, sales lines fixed, sales line new, and these are the names that I used. Next, I created a parameter, which is something that you can create very easily. I'm given this the name date, incremental or cut-off date, with a fixed value for the current value. And the only disadvantage of this technique is that it needs to be a fixed value. Maybe in the future we can make that completely dynamic. So the 9th of the 9th month, I'm going to use 9th of September, I think, as the cut-off date. Once I have this parameter defined, I'm going to go into the two tables and I will apply a filter on the shipment date field. For example, in the fixed one, I'm going to say only import entries before or equal to this date, and in the sales lines new or incremental, only import lines after this this date. I have done that here. You can see that also in the advanced editor that I am actually implementing the query here. Okay, that's a simple filter that we need to create here in Power Query. Once we do that, we can load the data. And you notice that all of the sales lines are here. Next, what I would like to do is a small test for which I will go here into Business Central and I will open the sales order and I'm going to add a new line. And what I'm actually going to do here is select item as a type, and then I am randomly going to select an item. I don't really care which item it is exactly. Also going to ignore the message. I'm going to say I would like to buy 5 of these tables. And next, of course, I'm going to change this and I'm going to enter a date which comes after the cutoff date that I have defined. So this should now be imported into the incremental table. If I go back to Power BI Desktop and I refresh, that's exactly what you will see. So let's wait until the data loads. And normally we should see an incremental record coming in. Voila, it has been imported. It's not a static row. So actually, I noticed that it was imported in the correct table. Now, how do I make sure that the static table does not refresh? That's something that you need to do in the properties in Power Query. Here you see that the static table, I'm loading it to the data model, but it's never going to be refreshed. while the non-static table, I'm loading it in a data model and I'm refreshing it. That's the big difference. Now, how can I union these two tables then back into one table called sales lines? Well, to union these two tables into a sales line table, you can use a DAX formula. You can say, for example, create a new table called sales lines, which is the union of the fixed and the incremental table. Once you do that, I'm going to use this table for my reports, and I'm very simply going to hide the two other tables. So the trick into implementing an incremental refresh is splitting the table in Power Query and then playing with the refresh properties, loading it into the data model and doing the union back again in Index. I've tried that a couple of times and it seems to be a good workaround. And the advantage is that you can even do that in the free version of Power BI. We don't even need a pro license. Of course, I've also documented this on my blog if you would like to find some more explanations. The next demo I would like to give is how can we link actuals and budgets. And this is a deep dive session, so I thought to talk about some complex topics. And in the beginning of the session today, I said, if you would like to build a good data model, you need to follow Star or Snowflake. But of course, in real life, you cannot always do that. If I would like to compare actuals with budget, I'm typically going to end up with a data model with multiple fact tables. As you can see here, ledger entries and budget. So is that a good idea? No, it's not a good idea. I'm going to fix this and convert it back into a Star or Snowflake model. Before I can do that, I need to make sure that I am able to link my ledger entries and the actuals and the budget table. And in order to do that, and that's usually the difficult thing, I need to find a field or create a field to determine for each and every ledger entry what is the exact budget. Now, the difficult thing to do is that in the ledger entry table, you typically have ledger entries per day, posting date. But the budget is usually not defined by day, but for example, by year or by month. So how can we link these two tables? Well, let me go and show you a small example. To be able to create the data model, I, of course, need a query for my ledger entries. So I have the ledger entry table in here with the group by. I have the budget entry in here with also a group by. But in the budget entry table, I basically have the date of the budget, which will not contain any days. It's typically the first day of the month for which a budget has been defined. While in the ledger entry tables, I have ledger entries for many, many different days. I'm also importing some GL accounts in here just to be able to slice and dice the data, and I have some dimension set entries. But the focus here is on the budget and the entries. Next, I'm going to pour this into a Power BI report where I am simply going to import all of the published queries and try to build a data model. So typically when you do that, you will be able to import all tables, and then you will be confronted with the typical problem, which is, okay, how am I now going to link the ledger entries and the budget? Because ledger entries are on day level, budget might be on month level. Well, the trick is to create a key, and I can do that, for example, here in the Power Query editor. And what I did was the following. I can see all of my budgets. And for my budgets, I see that I have a certain budget per month. And I would like to convert this into kind of a budget that can be recalculated by day or by ledger entry. And to do so, I will basically use the date field in the budget entry and get the month and the year out of that. I can do that in Power Query, very simple function. Then I'm going to combine month and year again into year month. And next, I'm going to add the account number to that column. So I have done that here in 3 steps. In real life, I could do that in 1 step. So this means that in the budget entry table, I now have a column which contains the year, the month, and the account number. All right. And now we're going to try to do the same thing in the ledger entry table. In the ledger entry table, we have our posting date. Using the posting date in the ledger entry table, I will then also try to figure out the month, the year, combine them, and also generate this key. All right, I now also have a year month account key in the ledger entry table. Now that I have these two fields, I can use them to link both tables. And it's typically a difficult thing to do, try to link the budget with the ledger entries. If I can create such a key, I am back almost in the star schema. And the next thing that I'm then going to do is I'm going to try to get rid of this budget table. But before I can do that, I need to create a new column in the ledger entry table, which is the recalculated budget for each and every ledger entry. And because of the relationship, I can very simply do so. How do I need to do that? Well, that is actually quite simple. I will go into the GL entry table. I will add a budget column in here. I will say calculate the sum of the amount in the budget table related to this ledger entry by making use of that key year month account number. Perfect. Once we have done that, we have the ledger entry table with the amount and the corresponding budgets. And I can continue to use this as the center of the fact table. And I can very simply then hide this in the report view. I only needed that table to bring over the budget. The next step in order to create these interesting looking visuals would then be some measures. Which is typically something I also do in DAX. And to do that, I have created a measure, for example, which is called total amount, which is the sum of the amount in the ledger entry. I have the total budget, the sum of the budget. I have profits that I have defined. Profit is the sum of the revenue and the expense. But before I can calculate profit, I need to have a calculation for revenue and expense. The expense is actually this calculation. It is the sum of the amount in the ledger entries where the account type is an expense account. And of course, then I also have the same for revenue accounts. Based on the total revenue and the total expense, I can calculate the total profits. And then I can use them in my visuals. I can have a look here at the total amount by month and by account. I can compare revenue and expenses if I would like to, and so on. The next thing I'm going to do then is to create a date table. So I can also do these date calculations. I would like to be able to calculate what is the, let's say, revenue this month compared to the same period last year. But to be able to do these calculations, I typically need a date table. The date table I'm going to also generate using DAX. With a simple calendar auto function. This generates the table, after which I can then see also the columns in here, which are columns I added manually to this date table, giving me also the possibility to report by day, for example. All right, once I have defined that date table, I can go back and define some more interesting measures. If we know that the total amount is the sum of the amount in the ledger entries and total amount last year is this, the total amount last year is a total amount for the same period last year, and I can simply reference the date table. It's a simple principle. If you implement this on total amount, and then you can also do that on budget if you would like to, on expense, on profit, on revenue. Then we have all the measures that we need to be able to create this nice looking report. I can even compare actuals with budgets by account, by category, by month. And I can even calculate a percentage to see if we are over or under budget. And that percentage then is another measure that I created based on the total budget and the total amount. I'm saying here the total budget is the baseline. The total amount is the value to compare it with. And based on these two, I can then calculate a percentage to see if I'm over or under budget. And then that percentage I can very simply also add it here in the visuals. On top of which I can then implement some conditional formatting, blue if I'm over budget and red if I am under budget. So a nice example of how we can do that, actuals versus budget. But it all drills down to the fact that we need to figure a way to link the two fact tables, bring over, recalculate the amounts, and then get rid. So we still have a star or a snowflake schema in the end. And that's then the actuals versus budget. I have some extra topics I want to show you, some useful tips and tricks, but I'm going to keep them for the end of this session because these are some nice to know features, but I think it would be more interesting for Renato to also cover some topics, for example, how to integrate Power BI with Teams and with Power Apps. So if it is okay, I will give the screen now to Renato, and then if we have some time left at the end, I can show some tips and tricks.
Thanks, Steven.
Just one small disclaimer. So like 10 minutes left, right? So just be aware of the time limit.
Thank you, Tomasz.
Yeah.
Okay, I will continue with Power BI and Microsoft Teams. So before that, I would like to thank you, Steven. Very good examples on how you can use the Power BI. And speaking about Power BI and Microsoft Teams, we are speaking about embedding Power BI reports inside the collaboration tool or Microsoft Teams. So I'm using Teams every day. As a user, I'm using it every day, and I want to have my Power BI data inside the Teams. I don't want to open the Power BI desktop tool and refresh the data. I don't want to go to Power BI service and then find the reports, or I don't want to have some different applications to find these reports which I need. And with Microsoft Teams and Power BI, I have three possibilities to use Power BI as a part of Microsoft Teams. The first one is Power BI tab, so which brings you possibility to embed reports and into Microsoft Teams channels and chats. The second one is Power BI app. For this one, you will need Pro license to use it, and will bring your entire Power BI experience into Microsoft Teams. So you are going to interact with all of your Power BI content right inside the Microsoft Teams, and which will bring you then personal experience for the Power BI. And last but not least, we have the chat in Teams, when I can easily share my Power BI report from Power BI to my Teams conversation, and then continue this conversation with my colleagues about Power BI. So to do this, I will go to my demo. And for this, I created one Power BI report. You remember it from the first demo, and I published this as a service into my service, and I have this inventory by location report. Now what I can do, I can easily click chat in Teams, and I will get the Power BI link, and I can, for example, share it with my team, for example, sales with my inventory workers. When I click share, the link is shared. Where I can now find this, when I go to my Teams, I will find my Power BI that it is shared here. Now here I can reply to this and so on. When I click on it, it will open the Power BI report for me inside Power BI. Okay, second step or second possibility is, for example, to add Power BI tab. And here I can find, for example, inventory by Latvians. And here I can see all my groups. And for this, I have sales and inventory group, and I can pin this to my team and to my channel. So now I am using Power BI report embedded into my Teams. So when I go back here, I will have this report available here. And the third option is Power BI application, where I will see the similar environment like when I go to my Power BI. Okay, here I will choose, for example, my workspace, and inside it, I will see my report. From here, I can then edit reports, change the colors, change the chart and so on. Or I can create the new reports and leave it inside my Power BI. So here you have the possibility to practically do the most actions which you can do also in Power BI. Okay, so this is how you can embed Power BI into Teams. Second very good integration, and which I really like, is, and I call it bidirectional integration, is from Power Apps to the Power BI and vice versa. So you can embed Power BI report inside the Power App, and on that way, you can have a Power App application, which has the data from the Business Central, and you can have the Power BI report, which is based on the data from the Business Central, all in one application. And another possibility is to embed Power App inside the Power BI, and on that way, bring another dimension to the Power BI, because now you can edit your data and automatically see the results of editing your data inside the Power BI. To show you how this works, I prepared some small demos. And for example, first example will be to show you how you can embed Power BI report inside the Power App. For this, I have one Power App, one report called Power App. And this chart is showing me the quantity of each of item per location. So here I can see the blue location, the west, and so on. And when I run my Power App, when it loads, you will see my Power App application. Here on the top, I have the items. So if I return here to my Business Central, I have my items. And on the bottom, I have Power BI report. So, and now when I go through each of these items, I will get the item availability for selected item. So for example, if I go here to Mexico, I will get the information about the Mexico. Also, when I hover over it, I will get the detailed information. How I did this, when I edit my inventory application, it will take some time. Okay. Skip. Here on the Browse Gallery, I have my items from Business Central. So this is my data source. And here I have my Power BI tile. And when I go to the tile URL, I added to my URL possibility to filter my report based on the selection on the Power App. Here I see the query inventory is my Power BI table, so query inventory, and this is the field on which for which I am filtering my reports. And now I can publish this to my user. Another example of using Power App and Power BI is when I go here in my inventory by location report. I have the chart called Power App for Power BI. And when I import this into my BI report, and I'll, for example, tag here, I have possibility to create a new application or to choose one of existing, and I will choose my existing inventory application and edit here. For example, here, this Power App can be based on, I don't know, sales data or some warehouse management system. And then I can combine this data with my Business Central data into Power BI. And right now from here, for example, when I go to my details of the items, I can, for example, change and apply this. And automatically, this will change my data inside the Business Central. So this is one of examples how you can use Power App based on the Business Central data with Power BI reports based on the also Business Central data to present your data to end users and use it in, let's say, one application. For example, here we can have analytics and data entry inside Power BI. This was my second demo. And I think that's all from us. Steven, do you have anything else?
No, I don't think we have time to do so. I think we covered everything, and I had some extra tips and tricks in case that there would be a lot of time left. But what we wanted to cover, I think we covered. And now we have some time left to do some Q&A. If anyone might have any questions, so feel free to ask.